Hey everyone, I hope you had a great week off. I know I did. I got some travel time in. Only spent 3 days in Shreveport for the last 11 days. Whew. So we are changing up our bell ringers. Now your Google form will be your closer for the day, and you will have a video or a podcast for your bell ringer. Make sure to listen for Write this in your Do Now section of your notebook. You may pause and get your notebook out and ready. Sometimes, like today, it will be information about our lesson for the day, and other times it may be more of an agenda slash information session. Let's get going. So, today we're going to be speaking about corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. And thank goodness they don't want you to write that. So your definition is going to be I'm sorry, not definition, but your abbreviation is going to be CPCTC. Comes from the first letter of all the main words, leaving out of an R. So CPCTC stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay, so you might have remembered this. We were doing the parts of a congruent triangle. So if we look over here, there we go, it's going now. If we look over here, we can look at our congruency statement to write all the congruent parts. We can mark them on our triangles, and we can also write them over here. I'm not going to do all these parts, but it has been a week, so we are going to warm our brain up just a little bit. For example, angle A corresponds to angle D. So A to D. Angle B corresponds to angle E. Remember, it's all about where they're located at. And that, of course, leaves angle C corresponding to angle F. Now to do the sides, remember it takes two letters to produce a side for us out of this statement. So AB corresponds to DE. AB gets one mark, DE gets one mark. That also means that BC corresponds to EF. BC, B to C, 2 marks. E to F, 2 marks, because we need to distinguish the difference between this one and this one. And that would leave your last one getting the 3 marks. Now to write the statements, I'm not going to write them all. I'll put the angle ones first. We said angle 1 is congruent to angle D. We also said that line AB, put the little mark above it, is congruent to line or side DE. And you would write that for every single one. So angle B congruent to angle E, and then you could say BC is congruent to EF, and so on for the last part. So hopefully that's got our brains a little bit stirred up and we're ready to go. Let's look at the next piece of information on this. Uh, there we go, it's sliding now. This you're going to want to pause and write in your notebook under Do Now section. Again, pause and write this in your notebook under the Do Now section. This is going to help you with your lesson that you're going to be doing today. These are your reasons that you use to prove sides are congruent. It's given, definition of midpoint, because it creates two congruent sides, and reflexive property. A side is congruent to itself. Reason angles are congruent. Okay, so this is for angles. It's given. They're vertical angles, alternate interior angles, alternate exterior angles, corresponding angles, definition of angle bisector. That creates the two congruent. Notice these, you only use these three if you have what? Parallel lines. That should be in your notebook under the Do Now section. You probably should pause to write all that down. I'm having scrolling issues here. Okay, scrolling on down. Again, we're going to double check that we understand the meaning for what does CPCTC stand for. So I'm going to go ahead and write it out in words. If you want to make a note of this, you can. It stands for corresponding parts, there's your P, of congruent triangles are and then congruent, the last C. So the letters come from, it's an acronym, they come from the first letter of the underlined in blue. Okay, that's where it comes from. Write this in your notebook. When do we use, and they're talking about CPCTC, when do we use it? We use it when asked to prove parts are congruent. And I'm going to make a side note over here. That means you're trying to prove that angles or sides are congruent. Okay, angles or sides. But first, you must prove the triangles are congruent. Okay, now I want you to think when it says this is what we've been doing. You've had hypotenuse leg, side angle side, side side side, angle angle side, and then what's the last one? Angle side angle. These are what we use here, and then we can do that. So just keep that in mind. So we go through this next proof. Again, if you need to write anything down, pause and write. Okay, let's look at a quick proof with what this will look like. Now don't panic on me. I'm going to not only do a proof here with you, but I'm also going to do it live with you today on a worksheet you'll be completing. But I just want to get our brains back into the game and get us geared up for this. One of the things that we have to practice, and we're going to practice this week, is writing this down. When we see this on the computer, I cannot answer anything down here, even if part of it's filled in, without actually marking some of this up and looking at this proof. So examples with CPCTC. The given statements. I'm not worried about this yet. I'm worried about this and what this looks like on this triangle. So it says AB is congruent to AD. AB, AD. If they're congruent, they both can get 1 mark. Notice you have 2 triangles, the one on top and the one on bottom. BC is congruent to CD. BC to CD. Okay. Now we need to prove that angle BCA is congruent to angle DCA. So BCA is congruent to DCA. So we're trying to prove that this little angle, let me do 2 different colors. This little blue angle is congruent to this little pink angle. That's what we're trying to prove. Now you notice sometimes these aren't congruent. This one's congruent to this one, but notice how our sides lined up. These 2 sides are congruent, these 2 sides are congruent. So let's see what we can make happen down here in our proof. First of all, I'm going to tell you with the format, with the 5 that they have, they list their given statements different. But remember, sometimes they can be listed as one long statement. But we're going to go ahead and fill in all 5 boxes. So we are going to list our given statements right here. And I'm getting this from right here. I'm not making it up. I'm not just pulling something random. I'm literally writing what they gave me. And my reason is given. Okay. And BC to CD. So BC is congruent to CD. That is also a given. Okay, now what can we go from there? So I do look up here and I do know something about AC. AC is part of both triangles. It's part of the top triangle and it's part of the bottom triangle, which means this piece is congruent. So that means AC is congruent. And I know I've been writing this as AC, but I notice they are flipping it a lot and what y'all are going to be doing soon. So AC is congruent to CA. So I'm going to do that today on so that y'all get used to seeing it flipped. And I told y'all they could write it either way. All right, so on number 4 at this point, I know that these three sides are congruent to these 3 sides, which would be which one on our congruency statement up above? Side, side, side. So down here, I can actually say that triangle ABC, and now I'm deciding how to write this one. Since it's ABC, I'm going to write in alphabetical order. Is congruent to triangle ADC. And this is based off side, side, side. Now, they wanted me to find an angle being congruent. That's why I have to use this one. If I know that a triangle is congruent, even though it's side, 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 I also know that all its angles are congruent. To be a congruent triangle, your sides and angles must be congruent. So now I'm not making this statement up. I'm using exactly what's here. I'm just copying it down. So angle BCA is congruent to angle DCA based off of CPCTC because corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles, this triangle is congruent based off this, are congruent. All right, so now I want you to go into Google Classroom and I want you to open CPCTC worksheet. I'm going to work out some of page 1 with you and proof 16 and 17 on the second page. You are required to complete pages 3 through 6 on notebook paper. You will turn them in to me on Thursday. No copied worksheets will be allowed on this because we're going to practice doing this on paper from this point on for the next few days.